All right, welcome to Real Talk. I'm Jason Whitlock of Foxsports.com, and you're listening to Real Talk on FoxsportsRadio.com. Thank you for joining me this Wednesday. All right, I hope that you read my Friday story on Maverick Carter that ran on Foxsports.com. It was a different look at Maverick Carter, who LeBron James' right-hand man, who has been criticized viciously since the decision. Some of that criticism emanating from yours truly via column. But I went out to New York last week and spent a considerable amount of time with Maverick Carter and took a look at what Maverick actually does for LeBron. And I stayed out of it and just wrote a story about what Maverick does and kind of let you, the reader, make up your mind. Maverick and his people believe they're setting the stage for a new model for athletes in terms of less interference from an official sports agent, a relationship, a partnership with a lifelong friend managing his business affairs. LeBron James empowering the people that he's closest to and that he grew up with, putting them in a position to not only help themselves but to help LeBron. Maverick and those guys believe it's a new model and they're shaking up the industry. Those of us that have lived a bit longer know others have gone this path before, and I think most notably perhaps Mike Tyson, the former baddest man on the planet, the heavyweight champion of the world. I think many of you remember, if you're a fight fan or if you've been around long enough, Mike Tyson was managed by his childhood friends, John Horne and Rory Holloway, along with Don King. Those guys not remembered fondly, I have to say. And so in my story, I reached out to John Horne, who again worked with Mike Tyson. And today I'm reaching out to John Horne again to talk about Maverick Carter and what they're trying to do, and you in the context of what John Horne and Rory Holloway try to do and how the media perceives these guys. Again, we're talking about African-American athletes who are coming from impoverished inner-city neighborhoods and them empowering the people that they grew up with to move up the business ladder as their athletic talents create opportunities. Anyway, John Horne, welcome to Real Talk.
Thank you, Jason. Thanks for having me.
John, I've said a mouthful. Maybe I've said too much, but when I do these podcasts, I try to stay out of the way and let the guest kind of drive the discussion. So I just want to begin with, what are you doing now? What have you been doing since your relationship with Mike Tyson ended? When did it end, and what have you been doing since?
Well, Jason, I've been staying quite busy. As you know, I've always been involved with entertainment periods. I'm here in California, stationed. That's where I'm stationed. My former partner, along that I had with Mike, Rory Holloway, also my longtime friend. We're doing a couple entrepreneurial, independent investment deals also, and I'm also involved with producing film and continuing on in different things, and about to get started on another boxing venture real soon.
John, one of the things that interested me when we first started talking 6, 7, 8 months ago is that you were involved in the entertainment industry before you were involved with Mike Tyson. Tell us about that.
Well, my very first thing that I was always involved with was my love was movie making, a little bit of acting, of course. And then also, I was always involved with sports. Sports has always been my very first love. And whereas I was involved with basketball more important than anything else as a child. Growing up, my family was very heavily involved with basketball, my brothers and so forth. I was very good friends in high school and so forth with Sam Perkins, and so I got to know a lot of the athletes at a very young age. Mike, of course, grew up same part of New York, upstate New York, when he was in Catskill that I originally was from. And but my first venture into sports, as far as professionally concerned, in actuality, was during the summer that Bud Webb won the slam dunk contest. We became really good friends, and that whole summer when NBA had exhibition games and so forth and so on, I asked Bud Webb and Larry Nance gave me the opportunity to promote some dunking exhibitions for them during those basketball games, and that was probably my first venture into dealing with athletes on a professional level anyway, as far as promoting them and dealing with them.
How did you meet Mike Tyson, and when did you meet Mike Tyson?
Well, as you know, my hometown is Albany, New York, upstate New York. Mike moved to Catskill, which is about 25 minutes from Albany, when he was like 14 years old. Roy Holloway and I known each other ever since we were like 8 or 9 years old. When Mike first came to Catskill, Roy was the very first one who really developed a young friendship with Mike when he was like 14, 15, 16 years old, him and his brother Chris. I had just got out of high school and was leaving, coming west to do what I had to do, but I had known Mike casually while he was up there. And long story short, by the time he started developing and coming of age, we had touched base a few times and so forth and so on. And really, before he fought for the title, before he fought in the tournament that made him the heavyweight champion of the world, before that period of time when we really got close, and he became actually, him and his trainer Kevin Rooney became two of the judges for one of the slam dunk competitions in Las Vegas that I had for Spud Webb and Larry Nance. So we crossed paths, and then as a matter of fact, ever since that weekend or whatever is when me and Mike basically never lost touch with each other after all for the next, I don't know how many years, or whatever it was, 10, 15 years.
How old were you when you became Mike Tyson's manager?
That was okay, now, I had been doing managerial work for Mike as my camp coordinator ever since 87, 88. So when I became Mike's official manager of record in 95. So that was
16 years ago.
Yes. And I think I must have been 30 at that time. I think, but I started working with Mike ever since I was like officially working with him since I was like 25. But I had known him for maybe 7, 8 years at least before then.
And do you feel like when you were made manager of Mike, do you feel like you were qualified for that job?
Well, let me just say this. As you know, everybody has their own introduction or their own way of getting to a particular place in life. If you ask me, do I think I'm qualified? Do I think I was qualified? I think I was qualified more than I even knew I was at that time. Not so much for what anybody else would believe what your qualification should be, but the kind of person I've always been, to be able to adapt to certain situations and never really being afraid to adjust to anything and be able to pick up on things quicker than most people probably would think you should be able to. That's been a way of my life all my life. I mean, since I was 13 and 14 years old, I have older brothers and sisters of me and everything else. My mother and father owned two or three properties, and I basically ran those properties for them since I was 14, 15 years old. I mean, I dealt with the tenants, I dealt with everybody, I collected the rent. I've been the one in my family who's always business oriented and plus loved sports. So it became to me, once Mike realized, I never went to Mike to ask him to let me do this for him. I was one of the friends who Mike recognized that he, differently than most of the guys who was around us or whatever, I was always business savvy to the point where very inquisitive and very interested in what was going on that side of sports and entertainment and everything. So it became like a natural process of our relationship that put me in a position where, at that particular time, anybody who really knows, there was no one better for that position than me.
Let me say this for people that are listening and think that put a little context. In the boxing world, I would tend to think not everybody in the business of boxing has 2 or 3 college diplomas or even 1 college diploma.
That's true.
So, it's not, boxing isn't a place where Harvard business graduates go and say, hey, I'm going to be a boxing manager. So,
and not only that though, Jason, let me say this. There's some in there with 2 degrees who don't know what they're doing. So understand that degree gives you a chance to get your foot in the door and give people the opportunity to believe you qualified. But at the end of the day, the proof is in the pudding. And the fact of the matter is, here 15 years later, truth be told, there's no one in sports who actually had the collective agreements and contracts that Mike Tyson had. And had he done everything he needed to do, we all know it would have been much, much more and much better. That's to this day. To this day, it has not been equaled.
I'm going to jump back to that, but I want to add something. When you say I was best qualified, I think someone like Bill Caton, or, he's passed away now, but people that were supporters of his would say Bill Caton better qualified to manage Mike Tyson than John Horne and Rory Holloway. How would you respond to that?
Well, number one, that's what history would tell them at that time. But history since then, the true history, not what they believed by what they read. You never heard nothing from John Horne. They never asked John Horne a question about what his truth was. The fact of the matter is, history tells Bill Caton did not do a better job managing Mike Tyson than I did. That's what history, the true history tells that. And Bill Caton did not do a bad job. I'm not sitting up here degrading Bill Caton. Bill Caton did what he could do, and Bill Caton worked with what he had to work with.
How would when you say you did a better job, though, quantify that? What makes you say that? Okay,
professionally as a manager, your utmost responsibility to your client, number one, is to solidify the best financial deals you can for the longest amount of time that you possibly can while he's in the prime of his life. And try your best to secure as many outside endorsements and everything that you possibly can to maximize his potential. He has more to do with that than anything or anyone else. You only get the reason why I say Bill Caton didn't do a bad job. You got to understand. I know that a lot of the world from the outside looking in, they look at Mike Tyson and they say, "Wow, that's unbelievable what he could have done and what he could have been and how much he left on the table, this, that, and everything else." I don't look at our situation with Mike Tyson like that. I know with our situation with Mike Tyson, I look at it and say it was unbelievable what we did with what we had. I know the whole story, the good, the bad, and everything else that was involved. And Mike Tyson had a lot of setbacks in his life before, other than boxing, that didn't give him the opportunities to be better prepared for the situation when he could take the best opportunity to do the most with his opportunities that he had. He from where he came from and his background, we all know pretty much what it was. No one to this day has ever seen the true, full, complete story as far as I'm concerned, but they know enough to know he had his hardships and so forth and so on. And by the time he realized some of his shortcomings or whatever, it probably got past him a little bit too late. But I don't look at that. We were very fortunate to do a lot of things that a lot of people never had the opportunity to do in life.
So I guess let me try to translate what perhaps you're saying is Mike Tyson, a once-in-a-generation boxing talent, but unlike a Tiger Woods, who's a once-in-a-lifetime golfing talent, Mike didn't come from that Tiger Woods ideal suburban Stanford educated situation. Mike Tyson came from a different place, which makes managing him and promoting him and getting endorsements more difficult than an ideal situation.
Number one, you're absolutely right, Jason. But let me add into that. So this is something I always said, and very few people ever heard me say it, because Mike. It was at one point where Mike Tyson and Michael Jordan was the two biggest athletes at the same time in the world. Mike, internationally, Mike was bigger than any of them because boxing is what it is. But I always knew what separated Mike Tyson from Michael Jordan was Mr. and Mrs. Jordan. Plain and simple as that. Plain and simple as that.
I get your point.
Plain and simple as that.
I get.
And I knew Mr. Jordan before he passed, and I also met Michael's mother. I've been acquainted with Michael ever since he was a freshman in college. Of course, everybody knows he went to North Carolina with Sam Perkins, who was a friend of mine since high school. So I had a clear understanding and seen up close the difference, knowing also my own mother and father, who I always had. So not giving any excuses that haven't been given already, because I never make no one more responsible for Mike Tyson at the end of the day than Mike Tyson. But there are special circumstances. We don't need to get into all that right now, but I'm sure we understand.
Let me ask you, so what is your take on what LeBron James and Maverick Carter are trying to do and the media reaction to what they're trying to do?
My advice, number one, as far as Maverick Carter is concerned, representing LeBron James, as long as he keeps his focus and he understands what his primary responsibility is and who is to, and not get caught up about what people think of him personally, he will be fine. He has a decent young man to work with. He understands the importance of making the most of himself in the prime of his life, and he is the athlete of the moment by far. As long as they stay committed to their goals and not get off track with what this particular article or this particular entity or person or reporters or whoever are saying about them, try to minimize their mistakes as much as possible. Don't look for too many pats on the back and keep moving forward. He'll be fine.
What do you think of your legacy when the media they trash you and Rory pretty good and say that
what they did, Jason, was underserve the people who they're supposed to be serving, which is the public. They're the force. That's why I love what you do. I've been knowing you now, like you said, for talking to you off and on for 8 or 9 months, and I can honestly say this: not one time have I seen anything before I ever started talking to you, and since you've been talking to me, have you been interested in anything but relating the story? How can you tell a story about a person? Just call him a gopher. Call him anything you want. Call him a lackey. Call him a part of an entourage. Degrade him any way you want. The one thing you can't do is take this. He was there. So no matter what story you tell, if you're going to tell a complete story, you got to give the gopher his chance. You got to give the lackey his chance. What does the lackey say? What does the gopher say? What does the entourage say? Call him anything you want. If he's such a fool and he don't know what he's doing, put him in the interview, put him in the article. Let everybody see how silly he sounds, how unprepared he is. Prove what you're saying. Not nowhere ever have you ever seen anyone care enough to give the public the gopher side of the story. So how real can it be? No matter what, I watched for years, and this is every incident that ever happened with my man Mike. The whole biggest thing, one of the biggest things professionally ever happened in his life was the Buster Douglas saga. This reporter has something to say. This analyst has something to say. They do 5 and 6 different segments in all different directions. But nobody drug Mike Tyson out of the streets, made him get on the plane after you chased him 2 weeks to get him in training, been with him every step of the way, know his shortcomings in training, how he prepared himself, realize better than anyone how that night happened when it should not have happened, and the only one who tried to make it right, me and Roy. No one ever heard our side of the story. No one knows exactly what happened in Tokyo for real. Mike, I'm not going to tell him. Mike probably don't even realize it as good as we do. But you heard everyone in the world degrade what we did, how we handled him in the corner. They seen the trainer do a couple of one bad thing, especially by putting unrecommended water bag over his eye. And they just ran every which direction they can instead of getting the public every side of the story so they can understand what happened as best they possibly can. And they have their reasons why they do things like this.
Did you not cooperate with the media? I'm sure people
ever. Two things, Jason. Let me tell you something right now. Number one, I've been blessed enough to know, like I said, I've been around big-time sports all my life, even before I started working with myself. I got an inside shot to realize, okay, I understand what kind of games are playing around here. Understand, number one, I purposely stayed away somewhat, but none of the entities who did these 4, 5, 6, 7 part stories on him and during any of those situations ever came to get our side of the story. You say what you want to say. You can call the person anything you want. He had enough sense to get in there. He had enough sense to be there. All these other so-called well-prepared, how did he got there? None of y'all helped him. Matter of fact, every one of you talked against him. If it was your choice, he definitely wouldn't have been there, but he's there.
Again,
so there's never been no complete story of Mike Tyson. Not concerning his relationships with his wife, Robin Gibbons from the beginning. No one truly understands everything. Nothing's been completely told. Nothing at all.
Again, though, I'm going to ask again. I'm sure people had to request interviews from you.
No. The only person who ever had me interview at that particular time, I believe the first televised was Roy Firestone at that particular time. No one else, besides our interviews we did for Showtime during the telecast and things like that, ever did a story on Mike Tyson and wanted to come and get the inside story from the people who were there. They did everything they can to circumvent the people from HBO and all the rest of them. None of them cared enough to do the true story from the people who were there.
Well, I believe you, but one thing what they would say is, hey, we talked to Mike Tyson. We got the story from Mike. Why do we need to?
They didn't. Okay, if they got the story from Mike, then look at the other people they got the stories from. They rather go back to a former manager. They rather go back to who they wish was the manager. They rather go back to somebody, instead of talking about the current day activities, the current day contracts and so forth. They find people who they think things should. They're going to find the people who they wish were there or who should know something about something or what's going on. Because their interest is not about being fair and giving the public, which is what this is really all about, relaying the story to the public so they will know or have the chance to analyze things and make their decisions about what is and what is not.
What do you think the most unfair thing that was said or reported or characterized about you and Rory? I mean, I've heard it. I mean, I had to put it in my story. People claim that you and Rory helped Don King fleece Mike of all his money.
Oh, boy. First of all, I'm gonna give you a couple of bullet points right here without going into this. I've heard that many times. Let me just say this right here. This is and this is on the record. You know, the world will be able to understand this. I mean, hear this. At the end of the day, Mike Tyson was represented by me and Rory as managers. Mike Don King was our promoter for Mike, amongst a couple other roles he played based on his qualifications for all the years he's been involved in this business. I'm comfortable with that. I analyzed that situation, and besides a couple of different topics, our relationship with Don, for the most part, was successful and rewarded. And any problem I may have with anything with Don King, ain't nothing we couldn't straighten out. But let me just say this right here. At the end of the day, Mike Tyson, net, after even taxes, after I'm paid, after Rory's paid, after Don's participation and everything else, his net is way bigger than anybody's gross. I'm gonna just lay that right there in front of you. Now, in particular, let me say this: legally, by the rules of the boxing officials, especially in the state of Nevada, Rory and I legitimately could have had a third of Mike Tyson's purse. Collectively, we had 20%. Collectively. And we got more for him coming out of prison, not college, coming out of prison, than anybody ever got any fighter anywhere in the world. Guaranteed money whether he won or lost. Whether he won or lost, and no one could dispute the opponents we picked for him.
I want
full control. This is what these managers did for him at that time.
Let me ask you this, though. Let me stop you. Let me stop you for 1 second. Let me stop. 20%, though, of his purse. So if Mike got paid $10 million, y'all got is that 4? Yeah, y'all got $4 million of that.
Yes, but you got to understand something.
You ain't thrown a punch, man. That's a hell of a price tag.
No. Hold it now. Don't. You can't take one part and someone else.
I'm sorry. Golly, hold on. That's $2 million. If he got paid 10, he got $2 million.
I don't even care. Let me tell you something, Jason. At the end of the day, I done analyzed this situation so many times. I know I ain't had no problem with it. Of course, it's $2 million. But let me just say this, Jason. Let me just say this right here. You get what you pay for. You cannot fault a person for the only way my fee goes up is if Mike's goes up. If I get Mike more, I get a little more. Okay? No one never, before Mike went to prison, you got to understand something. Everybody think Mike made a whole lot of money with HBO. Understand this right here. The deal that Bill Caton and Jim Jacobs made for Mike Tyson with HBO is this. He had an 8-fight deal for $24 million at the time. Mike never made more than $3 million for those HBO fights. And by the time he left Bill Caton, he had 5 fights left on that HBO deal. Our first 5 fights we worked for Mike Tyson, we had to bring him through that deal. We didn't like it from the beginning. We wasn't satisfied with that from the beginning. By the time we were able to operate for Mike and work for Mike and make the deals we wanted to make collectively, Mike, the only ones we got done was the 2 razor running fights. Didn't get caught up in that situation in the end. Unfortunately, he went to prison. We had to wait 3.5, 4 years, not making a nickel with Mike Tyson. I had full power of attorney of everything he owned, every car, every property, and everything. When he came out of prison, he got everything back from me. I took care of him like a baby while he was in there, all of his business. I kept him involved with it. I had special permission 2 times a month to take every check for every expense that was being paid for his properties, everything else, to take them checks to prison for him to sign every one of them himself. never making a penny with him while he was in prison. I stood by him like a brother. When he came home from prison and we picked him up, you guys seen him come out there with the cameras flashing and talking about the Muslims around him and all this and everything else. What he didn't talk about was John Horne gave him back every piece of property he had, everything he was in control of when he left, plus $78 million in bonus and advance money, of which nobody from MGM or Showtime ever got a chance to talk to him about the deal before they... That's what these managers did. Had they talked to him at that time, I don't know if they would give us 15 cents.
Let me...
Now, let me just leave that right there. Nobody knows the real story we're here, brother, and nobody never cared enough to know. But it'll be told the right way, and whoever gets it will be the beneficiary of it. And that hopefully, the biggest beneficiary will be the public.
When he came out of jail,
I had checks totaling $78 million from MGM and Showtime. $78 million. He ain't threw a punch. He ain't fought in 4 years.
But here's the question I want. And you got 20% of that $78 million?
See, there you go. No, I did not. Me and Roy collectively got that.
Yeah, I understand. So you got 10% of that $78 million, $7.8 million.
Yeah, and I earned every bit of it because you didn't hear you said that, but you didn't hear me say I worked for 4 years for free. You didn't hear me say I brung that man through 5 fights that was not our deal. That wasn't worth nowhere near the kind of money HBO and all was making off him at that time. You didn't hear me say all that. You didn't hear me say I flew every day, whatever, and sat at home to get his phone calls 4 or 5 times a day, every day he was in prison. You didn't hear me say nothing about none of that.
$7.8 million, I would have done it.
Yeah, no. This is $7.8 million. At the end of the day, you never knew you had coming. And nobody told me before I started that if you just go ahead and do this, and I guarantee you at the end of the day, you will have this. You think they wanted to give him like them contracts? You think they wanted to give him that money? Believe, when I went to Seth Abraham's house, who was running HBO at that time, me and Rory collectively doing our due diligence before we had Mike sign any deal with anybody. He brought out Shaquille O'Neal's contract with Orlando. He had a 7-year contract for $42 million. He said, John, Rory, that's what we had to do. We're going to make Mike the highest paid contract, the highest paid athlete in the world. Shaquille O'Neal is right now 7 years now. Understand it, 7 years for $42 million. This is what he's comparing an athlete to. He had a right to because he know he dedicated him last time. This is the same man who got Mike for 8 fights for $24 million. So this is the path he's on. We sit there, we listen to him. Long story short, Mike had nearly $300 million for 10 fights, and he can do in less than 3 years. That's just the base of the fight. The base pay for the fights, guaranteed money for the fights. He left $150 million on the table when he decided to leave Don King, and he let people talk him into, including me and Rory. Mike never went to get rid of me and Rory like they made him believe the only way to get rid of Don King is you got to get rid of John Horne and Rory Holloway too. And he made a fortunate decision, and I don't care what other people say about Mike Tyson. Know that I never did nothing wrong to him. Mike Tyson know that I never did nothing while he was in prison but take care of him like he was out here himself as best I could. Mike Tyson know while he was in prison I never stole nothing from him. Mike Tyson know when he was in prison I never made nothing with him. Why in the world, when a man in prison, I got millions of dollars of this property, all I do is sign on the dollar line and make up any story I want. I can at least sell one of them little cars to pick up me $100,000 if I want to. I can do something if I chose to. But I'm not making no money with him while he's in prison, got all this value of his, and don't take nothing from him. Oh, but when he come out of prison, I'm going to be a part of doing something. Come on, man, that doesn't make sense. It don't take no genius to put one and one together to come up with two.
Let me ask you this, though. Didn't Mike Tyson sue you and Roy Holloway?
Mike Tyson sued me, and by the time got to the mediation judge, just like this mediation going on right now with the NFL and these players, the judge looked at him and his lawyer straight in the eye and said, "I understand your claims against Don King, and I can see what you might have some dispute. I have no idea how Horne and Holloway's involved with this." Roy, you gotta understand something. We boys too now. Roy just said, "Man, I ain't spending a nickel fight this. I guarantee you ain't gonna find nothing else." I didn't like that. I spent a lot of my last cash on defending that. I don't forgive him for that. I'm not looking for Mike Tyson to this day. One day I talk to him. I don't like none of it. I don't like none how he allowed us to be a part of that. That wasn't, but you know what though? We all get caught up in doing some things sometimes. And as we get older, we realize maybe they should have handled it a different way. I never took it personally for real because I know what I did. And I know for sure I wasn't worried about ever being found. And then they said, well, yeah. Well, after the mediation judge came back and told them, I have no idea how you got any claim against Horne and Holloway for the managerial job they did here. But this is what the judge told them. And they said, yeah, we don't really have no problem with them, whatever. We didn't know they just were king, they were king, whatever. And they don't say I was never with nothing but right. Nothing but right. And when Don, at any point of any time that Don was alleged or involved with something right, if I was able to see through it and backtrack where something was, I had no problem ever straightening things out. Never. These are the real stories, not the stuff that's been thrown around for years.
What is the nature of you and Mike's relationship now?
I see Mike. I'm respectful. I leave it at that right now. That's how I handle it. That's how I want to handle it because I know that there's no way in the world. I don't care what no one else says. I don't care if nobody could tell him he should put me in a suit or whatever just because of some legitimate reason or some type of. That's my reputation out there, and he has no ground whatsoever to even have an inkling of me knowingly ever did anything wrong to him, financially or anything else. You got to remember something. Me and Mike's development, my love was never to just, if you notice though, through Mike's whole career, I never put myself forward to make myself a subject or wanted to be in boxing forever. I had 3 or 4 times that the first time I went with Mike, it was really because he had so much turmoil with Bill Caton, and then at the time his situation with Robin Givens too and so forth. He had a lot of stuff going on in his life. I was a very close friend of Mike's at this time. I was out in L.A. in entertainment, comedy, writing, and everything else. I went with Mike at that time because, one, I felt for him, and I knew that all I wanted him to do was get on the right track. One way or another, I never assumed it would take that long. I always had plans on not staying there long at all. The very first time I was going to leave was when he was. But a lot of people don't remember this. His first time he was going to fight Evander Holyfield was right after the Buster Douglas fight. We had signed an agreement to fight Holyfield before he even fought Buster Douglas. Okay? And so once that happened in Tokyo, I can't leave my man now. The biggest thing in the world. The biggest loss of his life. There's no way in the world I can leave him. I'm not leaving him right now. Okay, what do I look like being off soon as Mike Tyson lose? I'm running off to do some movie or something. I couldn't go then. Okay, cool. Buster Douglas, Holyfield beat Buster Douglas, and then once he got the title, he don't want to fight Mike no more. Duva and all the rest of them don't want to fight Mike now. They want to take the risk before when Mike was the champion because they want the super split. But at that time, they didn't believe no way in the world Holyfield could beat Mike. So they reneged on their deal that they were supposed to have. So and then once Holyfield beat Buster Douglas, like I said, he did not want to fight. Now, so what we did was Holyfield couldn't make real money again at that point unless he fought Mike Tyson. So what did we do? We went and got the next biggest fight in the world, which was Razor Ruddock. Mike got more money for fighting Razor Ruddock than the Holyfield guys for fighting his next fight, whoever it was. I don't remember at the time. He beat Razor Ruddock twice. I felt great about that situation. I knew he was there to get that title shot. I was going to be leaving right there. What did he do? When I warned him, I told him, don't go up to that Indiana Black Expo. You had business to take care of your own. We had commitments we were supposed to be. He never should have even been in Indiana. Okay? Nobody knows nothing about these stories. Everybody this, that, like we was running around there with him or something. He had no business up there. He jumped in his car in Cleveland at the house. He got on the road and shot down to Washington, D.C. He flew out of Washington, D.C. to Indiana. Next thing we know, that's where he is. This was right after the Razor Ramon fight, soon after. So now he gets caught up in that thing in Indiana. I can't leave him in. I'm caught up for the next year and a half. I can't leave him until he got this one or another. Unfortunately, we all know he ended up in prison. Okay? Now I'm stuck for another. He in prison. People don't know. They think we somewhere. Except for behind them bars, and except for the personal things that prisoners go through that no one out here could ever understand, you have no idea how much we both felt like we was in prison for 3.5 to 4 years, doing nothing except what pertained to, because you got to remember something too. Because of Mike's circumstances, everyone knew he had an unfair trial. Regardless of whether they think he did it or not, the trial was unfair. The level of the playing field was not level. So therefore, Mike's appeal possibilities was always strong. I worked closely with Alan Dershowitz and his brother for 3 years. I got an education in law that nobody probably ever got without going to college, period. And every day, he had a possibility of being called up on appeal. So we was on edge for the whole 3.5 years. I couldn't leave then.
John.
By the time he came home, we all know the story then. He finally got his titles back and so forth and so on. What did he do then? We had contracts locked up. We personally had money guaranteed to us. All he had to do was show up in the ring. Who could dream somebody could mess up something like that? Everything's guaranteed. Lose me, no problem. We can handle that. Matter of fact, when he lost the first fight to Holyfield, he never should have even fought the second one right away. Mike, you don't need this right now. We already got you taken care of. He could fight Michael Moore next, get $25 million guaranteed for fighting Michael Moore. Holyfield can't fight nobody and get $10 million if he don't fight you. No, he listens to people in the street. He listens to other people. Yeah, no, I want to go ahead and do this. I want to do this. You don't need to. Get yourself together. Get you a couple fights under your belt. Go back and get Holyfield later on, whatever, 6-7 months from now, whatever the case may be. He makes Showtime pay Holyfield $33 million when he couldn't get $10 million for nobody else. Mike could have fought Michael Moore for $25 million, got himself back together the way he really should have. The second fight never would even happen the way he do. So what did he do? Got everything locked up. You as a manager, you did everything you can do. You get all the guarantees in place. I'm out walking out of the ring, getting ready to sit down in my seat. I hear the crowd go up in a big roar. I had my back to the ring. Hadn't came off the whole. Hadn't even set my seat yet. How does somebody mess up a situation like that? He almost eats a man up in the ring.
John, I got to wrap it up.
So you got to understand something. No one knows no true story of the whole, this personally and professionally when it comes to Mike Tyson. And anybody who try to tell a story about Mike Tyson, especially how it relates to the situation with Don King and boxing and everything else, without John Horne and Rory Holloway involved, is doing the public a disservice. It can't be told.
John, fascinating. Good stuff, fascinating stuff. You're very passionate about it. I appreciate you taking the time. I may want to come back to you and try to do a part 2 because you have a lot to say. Give me a yes or no answer. A yes or no answer, and then we got to go. Did Mike Tyson rape that woman?
No.
Huh. All right. Thank you. I appreciate it. I really appreciate it.
Appreciate being here, Jason. Thanks a lot.
All right. That was John Horne. This was Real Talk. I'm Jason Whitlock. I'll be back next week.
So just chill till the next episode. One, two, three into the four. Snoop Doggy.